we're in Italy. He was a strange-looking person. And I thought, okay. And I looked around just to know that he belonged there, because he came out of nowhere. He said, Papa. And then somebody knew that I was a little perplexed with what to do. They said, it's Jared. You have no idea. He was not anything I had ever seen before. He was a total different person. I've never seen that. I mean, that's one thing people put makeup on. It's one thing. He is the person they made him up to be. And I just bowed to him. And I said, when I see genius, I have to just bow. You've made my day. I want to go do this film now. I want to work. Oh my God, it was inspiring. The way Ridley Scott takes it, he makes it, brings it up. He gives it a kind of energy and drama and humor, and it makes it. He's a great filmmaker. Ridley Scott is a great filmmaker. It's about a lot of different things, and it's about trust and betrayal. It's about adultery, and about a kind of feeling of reaching the heights, and then how things change, how they manifest, how they mature, and then they go back. And it's about a world that for some reason I think is identifiable. You can identify with this world, even though it's exotic in its own way. Yet the emotions, the feelings are very identifiable. You immediately know feel it. Jeremy Irons plays Rodolfo, and I play Aldo Gucci, and we're brothers, and we own Gucci. It's ours. Our father started it, and we are carrying on, and it's in the 90s, it was really, it had a phase. In the 80s, you know how those things fluctuate, and it was doing well, and the business was prosperous, and also the nature of the material was sometimes a bit jaded, and yet it was Gucci, and it had made a great name for itself, and its quality was way up there. At the same time, Aldo was trying to keep it afloat, and the competition came and all that. And the two brothers are different. I think Rodolfo tends to be more artistic and stays back, and doesn't have he doesn't get caught up in the avarice, and he keeps himself at distance, and Aldo is much more oriented to the world and what it requires in the competition, and is always looking for a new angle. He's in the family, and he loves his brother. He loves Rodolfo. They love each other, but they are aware of their differences. So if you were to say that Aldo is the person who knows the business inside and out, and he feels more comfortable outside running the show, because he knows that Rodolfo has a good control of the inside. He still has ideas, comes up with them all the time. He has the son, Paolo, played by Jared Leto. And Jared is, and Paolo is, who knows? You know, I can say the character in the film is played more or less he's not on the brightest bulb on the shelf, although I don't like making that determination, but he is different and he's awkward at times and can be easily manipulated. And so that's almost his Achilles heel, almost Aldo's Achilles heel. He knows it, but he has great love for his son. Patrizia's the one that Lady Gaga plays. She made that character. And that's how everybody's going to think of this woman because of what she did. How she expresses it and opens it like, well, any great actress would do. I mean, it's hers. Talk about owning something. It's her. It's hers. This is so different from what she did with Stars Born. It's different, totally. So that's going to be a revelation. You'll see it. It's great to see. You know, she's a star is born. A great actress is born. It's amazing. Oh, the great Adam Driver. He's great. I don't understand how he does these different roles he does. I mean, he embodies a role in such a way, and he brings a dimension to the film that, in some ways, lifts it and grounds it at the same time. You know where you are when you're with Maurizio. There's a level that he plays on. It's so individual, his own thing, and he brings that kind of solidarity to the film. You know where you are, but it's a great performance, I have to say. It's again nuanced, very nuanced, subtle, but it's why you go to the movies, really, to see that. I was very taken with it. It's interesting when someone who has such natural gifts, I mean, the talent he has, just the sense of things, and he's been doing it for 50 years. 50 years. So he's learned a few things, being out there, and he goes for it, and he's got a great energy, of course, and he helps you. He really, truly helps you. You're doing a scene, and he says to me, "Oh, okay, yes, Al, yes. But why don't you do this? Do the scene from the middle and do the first part at the end." And you think, nobody has ever said that to me. I've never heard that said before. I don't know what to do. This is crazy. And you do it, and it works. So, you know, after that, it's someone who's it's like he's magic. He does magic. And he shoots at 4 cameras. What's better than that?
I feel so honored and I feel so grateful to have worked with the legendary Ridley Scott on this film. And just in general, I mean, he's someone that I would describe as a architectural visionary. He's painterly in the way that he approaches his films. He's also a mathematician, and the camera work is geometry. And he also understands the emotional quotient of a script and how to work with the actors and navigate what we're trying to say, the story we're trying to tell. And also, he doesn't have, I don't feel, this preconceived idea that's so nailed down when you walk on set that there can't be spontaneity. There's all this room that he makes for humanity and for humor. And in this film, I felt that with an already great script, he gave us the space for it to be fun. If I could describe Ridley, it's almost as though we as the cast were all different instruments. And when I say different instruments, I mean in an orchestra. There's everything from the drums to the bass to the brass to the woodwinds, the strings, right? And because we're all so different as actors, This movie is him conducting a symphony of all these different musical parts. And he does it in a way that only he can do. And I feel that the edit was in some ways handmade to support the performances of every actor and support the true essence of the film. Essentially, there was all these sort of famous dynasties in Italy, and Gucci was one of them. And what we watch is an outsider, Patrizia Reggiani, come into the family and grab a hold of Maurizio. They have a sexual love. They have a wild, youthful love. And what I think most people might perceive about the film before they see it is that she was a gold digger. But when they got married, his family had turned their back on him. So she didn't marry for money, she married for love. This is a story that chronicles everything that happened from the time that they met to the time that he died, and what took place business-wise within the family, how she got involved, how things became complicated, how he changed, how he morphed, and how her heart was broken. And I think the story shows a woman pushed over the edge, a woman that is adhering to a classist society in a way where she's trying desperately to transgress her class, but she's never as shiny as the Guccis. She's always an outsider. She never really fully makes it. And because they are all obsessed with something that's inherently evil, which is money and privilege and power, while they're all fighting over Gucci, they don't recognize the real disaster, which is that she's falling apart. In addition to working for 6 months on a Northern Italian accent before we started filming for 3.5 months, I read every exposition that I possibly could, anything that I could find that didn't have too much of an opinion. But then I lived in Italy for a short period of time, and I walked all around Italy, even during a red zone, and whatever place was open, I would go inside and I would say, I'd have my mask on and no one knew who I was, and I would say, what do you know about Patrizia Gucci? What I find intriguing about the film is that as you watch her in the beginning, I think that almost in any given movie where you see a woman with such powerful energy, you assume that there's this like gold-digging, sexual, risky undertone, when actually I view her very differently. I think she was just trying to matter, and it was almost embarrassing. She wanted so much to be taken seriously by Maurizio's father, by Maurizio's uncle, and even to have some kind of power over his cousin. She was smart, and she's felt that she knew what to do in order to inspire the company to be greater. But it was really an illusion because they were all just using her to get to Maurizio. To make a movie about real Italians that is about a crime, but is about a family. And it's about Italian business and this nature of the transfer of power and the balance and how it can not just destroy the family, but how things that are important can go unnoticed. And I think that's the power of a woman. I think the power of a woman can very often go unnoticed. Working with Salma Hayek was incredible. And, you know, if I could express the scale, to work with somebody like Al Pacino and have him say to you, this is not a girl's game, Patrizia. And then to work with Salma Hayek and have her be on my side to fight against this systemic patriarchal system. This is the seesaw that she was in the middle of. And ultimately she just tipped all the way in the other direction, and she lost her mind. It was not that she wasn't motivated by this idea that she could be bigger than what she already was, but that she also loved him and really felt that she didn't belong. So what I think you see on her face in those scenes is, I don't belong here, but I'm intrigued by this. And I'm going to do everything that I can to just be as quiet as possible while I deal with the fact that nobody here is recognizing that me and Maurizio just got married. No one's complimented me about our wedding. And I'm going to really do my best to fit in. And I think this is something that is consistently important about her as a character, is what does it mean to not feel like you're doing anything wrong by loving somebody that has more than you? What does it feel like to want something more for yourself in life? I loved working with Janti Yates. I mean, she is an absolute genius. She was wonderful to work with. We did everything from wearing vintage clothing to archive Gucci, to things that I had from my own collection, to custom pieces that someone from my team from House of Gaga made for me on set. And they were custom pieces to make exact replicas of something that Patrizia Gucci had worn. I have to say that my favorite thing about the way we worked, Frederick Aspiris did my wigs and hair, Sarah Tano did my makeup. It was like a science lab, and what was most important was that it never got in the way of the story. I never wanted anyone to see her on camera and just be staring at her clothes, staring at her hair, staring at her makeup, and I have to hand it to them. I think that everybody did a really elegant job, a very nuanced job. My favorite outfit that I wore was when I wore a teal blue plunging neckline dress that I wore while pregnant, dancing with Aldo at Studio 54. I also really loved this pink jacket that I wore with lace on it while I was talking to Maurizio and Domenico about Paolo starting a trade war. I loved working with Jared. He was wonderful on set. He was so committed to his role. I appreciate him very much because I also like to not break character. So we had a lot of fun together, always in character together. He gave a very brave performance. And it's also not easy. From experience, from my own art in wearing prosthetics during Born This Way, my album, it can be very claustrophobic, and he really worked through, I think, so much to make his character come to life. And he also was equally loving to everybody around him, and he created a really lovable character. Oh, I loved working with Adam. I think he's one of the most brilliant actors on the earth. I think that he has a way of approaching a script that is unparalleled. He's both emotional and academic. He's intellectual as well as deeply visceral. I loved getting to know him. I appreciated that he worked with me as well as someone that was in character all the time, that he made space for me and upheld that part of me while we were working. She knew she mattered at some point to the family, I believe, but to the business, it was clear that she didn't matter, even though she had a tremendous influence on him. And she was his confidant and his advisor. You know, she used to always say that I used to advise Maurizio in business. It's remarkable to me that even with her advisement and even with the fact that he went through with all the things that she suggested that he do, that there really was an illusion of power. She was strong, so he loved her strength. But also, she was kind of inherently weak because she was a woman in a man's world. And there was only so much she could do, as many women know. I believe people should go to the theater to see this film because not only is it unlike any Italian film I've ever seen, or any film about an Italian family or Italian crime that I've ever seen, it's so fun and it's so humorous. And in a almost post-COVID world, we all deserve a laugh followed by a tear, a grave moment followed by a joyful one, and a sigh of relief. I think people should go out to see this movie because they will have a genuinely good time. It is such a wild ride, and every second of it is entertaining. I think one of the things I'm proudest about in this movie is even with all of the artistic ways that I just adore Ridley and adore this film, it blows my mind how entertaining he made this film. It blows my mind what a blockbuster it will be in people's hearts. And it was designed to be that way. And that I believe is part of his magic and his love. I would like to highlight the sadness of a woman shattered. The realization that she had that she didn't matter to any of these men, especially to the one she loved the most. And I would like to shine a light on our ability to have compassion even for the most despicable humans. I found a way to love her. I had to. In order to play her, I had to love her. But I also realized in a really terrifying way that when you are so hurt that you hurt other people, you're really hurting yourself.
Well, it's about the Gucci family and about the implosion of that line when run by the family, about greed, about ambition, about family relationships. I play Rodolfo Gucci, who, along with his brother Aldo, had inherited the firm from their father. And I'm an Italian. We run the firm. Aldo runs it in New York. I run it in Italy, in Rome and Milan. Rodolfo was an actor. He was a film actor. And he married a very beautiful German actress who he adored, who was a much better actor than he was. And so he sort of gave it up, but adored her, and she died. So when we meet him in the movie, he's still obsessed with her. He's actually cutting together, spends all his time cutting together bits of her movies into a sort of collage. And is not very interested in the family firm of Gucci. So it potters along, providing him with a fine income, but his brother Aldo has great plans. I thought the script of Gucci it's a fantastic story. It's based on a book. I can't remember the name of the book, but it's about the Guccis. And that's a pretty rip-roaring yarn. And the script takes that. I mean, it's Italian, it's flamboyant, it's a bit of fun. Ridley, because he's a great director, he, with a great track record, made some fantastic films. I worked with him last on Kingdom of Heaven, out in Morocco. So it's always nice to be asked again. The Guccis like to think that they're aristocracy. They aren't, but they like to think they are. Patrizia certainly is not. She's a real go-getter, a fantastic woman, but a snob like Rodolfo, who I played, he wanted far better, he imagined, for his son. Little did he know that she would do such great things for the company. Rodolfo is very controlling of Maurizio, treats him like a sort of 12-year-old, is very reliant on him and his company, his personal company. Maurizio lives with his father because his father has no one else apart from on screen, his wife. So Maurizio is important, and I think Rodolfo tries to sort of put him on ice, stop him growing up into an individual, which of course he is. He's in his 20s, and resents the fact very much that he wants to leave home, that he wants to get married to this unsuitable woman. And of course, when Maurizio moves out, Rodolfo misses him enormously and realizes he's made a huge mistake. Aldo is a go-getter, slightly a vulgarian. New York suits him very well compared with Italy, which from Rodolfo's point of view is much more European and classical. But Aldo is a man determined that the firm of Gucci will expand enormously, something Rodolfo is not at all keen on.
To see this fierce female producer bring this to life, and in the way that she did it. I believe that special movies have a special destiny, and sometimes they take a long time because it's meant to be the perfect combination, and she did it. And I think there is no other version of this that could have been better. And I am so happy that on top of it, I got to be a part of it. The film, it's about the story of a company and the love story behind it. Because there is a love story behind it, and it's very tragic. It's very tragic. The film is about obsession, about passion, about family, about betrayal, and many other juicy things that I'm sure the audience would enjoy. Pina is a very interesting woman. She's clairvoyant, she's a psychic. In the movie, she has a show on TV, not a very fancy one, where she can tell the future. And when Patrizia and Pina meet, they immediately connect with each other. And something that started as a professional relationship becomes a very strong, very important friendship for both of them. Pina is not a very sophisticated woman. She comes from humble backgrounds, like Patrizia. And when Patrizia comes into her life, she just changes the way she sees everything. She just changes everything. I think that Pina was kind of bored of her life and not excited about herself. And when this like dynamite comes along, full of not only passion, there's like almost like a madness, like an adventurous spirit. And Pina can see that Patrizia has the potential of an incredible destiny, the destiny of a queen. But also she's lonely, and they're both lonely. And they really connect with each other. Patrizia, who is played by Lady Gaga, it's a woman that she's been abused a lot, especially by the mother. And also her mother has a lot of expectations for her. And she meets Maurizio. She falls in love with him. And Maurizio is somebody with no ambition and not very active or reactive. And of course he falls in love with her madness, her spirit. And like she changes Pina's life, when she comes into Pina's life, she also changes Maurizio's life completely. And they have a very torrid love affair. Lady Gaga is an extraordinary artist. She, including acting in it. She's fantastic. I think part of her secret, of her special talent, because she is special in everything she does, and that's what makes her a true artist, goes beyond just being a singer or just being an actor. It's her level of commitment and passion and strength to throw herself completely at anything she does. And I feel very privileged that I was able to see and experience this with her and be a part of it in a way. The way she goes in and gives it all, every take, every day. And she was able to disappear and just become Patrizia. So it is behind this name of Gucci that a lot of people associate with fashion, and when you see the story of it, it becomes more personal. You know, there was a family with a dream that started this journey, and within their journey, there is a lot of intrigue and suspense and mystery and crime and greed and betrayal. And it's interesting when you think that it just started as a company just for a family that then becomes a saga of madness. When you're gonna do a movie about Gucci, the first thing that comes to your mind is beautiful costumes. And that is the case with Patrizia. However, in the case of Pina, the challenge was, how do you find the ugliest, most tasteless outfits that would make me look the worst? And it was kind of frustrating, but fun and funny at the same time. And especially because at some point, she does take me shopping. She does a makeover, but Pina doesn't have the taste. She might have the ambition, but doesn't quite have the taste. So without Patrizia's help, she'd be completely lost. And so it's ironic that I get to do this movie about Gucci and I get to look horrific. When you work in a Ridley Scott film, you really feel the standards across the board, every single department, and it's very exciting. The sets were sublime. It was just a joy to show up and discover them every day and move in this space with the direction of Ridley Scott, that it's a master of space and geometry and blocking, and not every director gets into that, and he's just genius at it. Having a director that has experience like probably no other director. I don't think that there's one that's made more films, and more good films for sure, but that it's so young and open in his mind and gives you freedom when it's the right time and structure when you need it. I was so excited to go there, and in this occasion, we wanted me to be plump as possible. So on top of it, I had like complete freedom with the amazing food. But of course, when you are doing a character, and it's based on a true story, and on a time and a space, nothing better than to feel the spirit of this place, that it's so important, the spirit of Italy, for Gucci, for the brand, for what it means, for the family. So I loved it. The tone of the film, it's not a typical Ridley Scott tone, just from what I saw when we were shooting. And it's a little bit bigger than life. So he took a true story that was already bigger than life and then massaged it around with all the different departments and with the cast, and every actor is amazing, and made it even bolder, bigger, heavy. You know, you feel the weight, not because it's heavy, but because there is an importance to it. And I think to really go into that universe and experience it, you're not going to get the same effect in your television, on your couch, or on your bed. It's an epic. it deserves the ritual. You know, to get some friends, to make the trip, to make it a night, to make it an event, and submerge yourself in this glamorous drama. I think the way the story happened and the way Ridley Scott projected it into this film, it's also gonna make the audience maybe wonder about morality. And I think that it's not gonna be one of those films where the audience walk out of it and everybody thinks the same thing. There's a lot of gray areas that he manages brilliantly.
Paola Franchi is, she's the second, not wife because she didn't have time to get married, but she's the second woman who really shares Maurizio Gucci's life. And in the movie, they've decided to imagine that they knew each other before, and it's really a character who's supposed to show the differences between Patrizia Gucci and her, because they're two women from a complete different world. And the fact that Patrizia Gucci is not from the same world as Maurizio Gucci is something that will be determinant in their relationship and in the tragedy that they're believing. And she's completely at ease with those people and social class. I felt like with this character, he had to feel the man he wanted to be and couldn't be with Patrizia, but at the same time she had made him the man he was, so there's something very cruel about it. So yeah, it was interesting not to be judgmental, but try to understand how it functioned between all of them. I was very moved by this woman, the real person, because we know more about her, of course, once we start watching documentaries or reading about her life. And I think she's been through a terrible tragedy, and then I know that she has lost her son. So I think she's a woman who's had a very hard life, and I respect very much what she's been through. So I would describe her. I think. It's not mentioned in the movie, but she was divorced when she met Maurizio, so it's a mature relationship, and she's a mature woman, and she knows what she wants, and she knows what makes her happy, and so there's something serene in her way of being, and she's not trying to prove anything to anyone. Patrizia, she's a woman in love, and a woman, she has ambition, and she has she likes money, she says it. She has this very famous sentence, I'd rather be unhappy in a Rolls Royce or Cadillac rather than happy on a bicycle. So that tells a lot about her. She's trapped in her dreams of grandeur and of magnificence, of opulence. And she's dangerous too, because she's hurt and she thinks people owe to her. Maurizio Gucci is being interpreted by Adam Driver. I have to say they both made an incredible physical transformation, and they really look like the original characters, and this is really the way they've body language them, that's quite astonishing. And yes, and Maurizio Gucci is somebody trying to break free from a lot of things, from his family, and with the help of Patrizia, he will break free from his family, and then he wants to break free from Patrizia. It's incredible because he's very precise and subtle, and at the same time, he's so free, and he allows himself to really explore the possibilities of the scene, of the characters. It's a real freedom that's very impressive. Because it's grounded, it's in some profound reflection and thinking and thoughts of who's the character, what he's doing at that moment. And then, yes, there's something theatrical too, in the way he involves his body. It's very interesting because there's a lot of humor, I think, They want to be kings, but they behave like clowns until the end, until the tragedy. So the movie marries that point of view here, that distance. The costumes were just, because it told everything. It told the moment, like the 80s, 90s, and because that's when my character arrives. And Italian bling bling, you know, so that was very strong in terms of colors and proposition. And I think that Genti has made an incredible work, and I can't wait to see all the other scenes and the show and the fashion shows. And then I really liked my skiing suit, which was made on me, and it was just incredible. He's always happy and open to any proposal that you're going to do on set when you're acting. So we do a few shots, but not that much because you have cameras all around. So and he sees the tiniest detail. He sees it, and most of the time he encourages us to keep going into that, you know, freedom of the acting and trying some things. So that's a beautiful way of trusting his actors and making you feel like, yeah, happy on set. Apart from the incredible performances of not only the actors but of every person who's worked on the film, on this incredible artistic direction, there's a pleasure and a curiosity of being immersed in a society that is so different from ours, and at the same time you can recognize humanity. So it's and again, I think there's a distance and some humor which is really appreciable in the movie. So I hope it will be as enjoyable as it can be.
I had written a script called The Eel that was on the blacklist, and Kevin Walsh, who is the president of Scott Free, was producing that film. And when he joined Scott Free, one of the projects that he brought up to Ridley and Janina was The Eel. So they read it, and they'd been working on this Gucci story for a while, and they had tried, I think, with quite a few different writers, and it never quite clicked. And for me, it was such a familiar story because I grew up in Italy and my mother's a fashion designer. And I remember reading, about the murder and thinking, wow, this would be an incredible film. So Kevin brought me in to meet with Janina, and we immediately clicked. She grew up in Costa Rica, but she also lived in Italy, and so there was a lot of synchronicity there. And it was just a very organic process. I really felt the story, and I was very familiar with a lot of the places that the Guccis were in, and that they lived in. So it was it sort of came out quite naturally. Well, I had a great foundation in Sarah Gay Forden's book. She did this incredible job compiling essentially the biography of the Gucci family, and so I read the book quite a few times, and then I dove into articles from the time period of the 70s and the 80s when the events took place, and the family was so well known and there was so much information that it was really really fun to sort of become an investigator and go into the Repubblica from 1977 and read at the time what they were saying about the various family members. When I wrote it, I just could not stop thinking about Lady Gaga, and I even said to my friend, I was like, if I could have anybody play this character, it would be Lady Gaga. And it was just one of those things. I couldn't stop imagining her in the role for many reasons. Obviously, the fact that she's of Italian heritage, the resemblance that she has to Patrizia, the kind of passion and the drama and the talent. I mean, she's just such an incredible person and so creative. So I really dreamt of her joining the project while I was writing it. So the fact that she ultimately did did such an incredible job was a gift. One thing that we really talked about was the Shakespearean nature of the story. I think that's something that kept coming up. You know, you could kind of draw lines between the true story and some of Shakespeare's great characters, whether it was Maurizio, who's sort of like a Hamlet. Obviously, Patrizia would be a Lady Macbeth. Paolo's sort of like a buffoon. I mean, there's a lot of parallels with the great Shakespearean tragedies or comedies. Movies like these, like House of Gucci, don't really get made that much anymore. They're not, they're really sort of luxuries. And so to have this kind of film, this kind of story, told with the scope that it's told in is an amazing thing. And I think Ridley just really was excited, you know, to jump in and tell a story that takes place over 30 years with this massive canvas and these incredible, you know, twists and turns, and it's also genre-wise, it's kind of, it's a crime thriller, it's a fashion biopic, it's a love story gone wrong. I mean, it has so many different shades. So I think, you know, he was like a kid in a candy store, really. So this film is about the Gucci family spanning 30 years. And it's really about the romance at the center of the family that occurs between Maurizio Gucci, who's the heir to the throne, and Patrizia Reggiani, who's a young, middle-class Italian girl who is basically being groomed by her mother to marry up in society. And Patrizia meets Maurizio, and their relationship blossoms very passionately and very quickly. And she starts pushing him or convincing him that the other members of the family needs to be eliminated. And he does so, and he does so quite successfully. And once he's eliminated everybody, he eliminates her as well. So she obviously feels a little resentful about that, and hires a couple of hitmen to off him. That's the story, essentially. Jared Leto was so playful, and so I just loved what he did with the character, and there was a real sense of spontaneity in his performance, even though he took the character and the writing quite literally. Every now and again he would come up with a line or two or a little nuance that I thought was so beautiful, and the other actors too. I mean, it was just so wonderful to see people take the writing and add to it, and really kind of feel freedom creatively to improve on it and to build on it, whilst at the same time keeping what I had written. You know, Gaga, the moment when she says Father, Son and House of Gucci, which has now gone, I think, quite viral, that was not in the script, by the way, I have to say. That was Lady Gaga's genius ad-libbing. And there was a few lines like that. There was a few lines that I was sitting there thinking, wow, that's a great line, I wish I had written that, you know. Lady Gaga plays Patrizia Reggiani. At the beginning of the story, she's 25. And Patrizia is a young Italian girl in Milan with no real career prospects. She's basically a socialite, a very friendly lady who just sort of wants to meet new people. And her mother pushes her a lot into finding a sort of rich, upper crust boyfriend. And one night she meets Maurizio at a party, and essentially that begins the story as we know it in the film. She's a woman who starts off quite positive, quite joyful, and ends up being extremely dark and tormented. So it really has an incredible arc, and I think that's one of the things that Lady Gaga does so beautifully in the story is go through these colors and through these shades, and bring a real humanity to the character and a relatability, which I think was very important. The unattainable, in a way, the fact that the Gucci family really are or were the royal family of Italian fashion. I can't think of many other fashion houses that had 3 generations running through them. And so for her, as for everybody else really growing up in Italy at that time, they represented clothing aristocracy. And of course the fact that she genuinely, I think, loved Maurizio was an added bonus. But there was a real sense of having achieved the unachievable in a way when she penetrated that barrier of the Gucci relatives. The fact that she managed to do something that I don't think many people would have been able to do. Maurizio's role in the family, I always sort of equated it to Michael Corleone in The Godfather. At the beginning, he really doesn't want to have anything to do with it. He honors the legacy. He knows obviously who he is. He knows that the weight on his shoulders is very heavy. But he's also very happy being a lawyer, studying law. He's even happier when he's playing with trucks, when Patrizia's father essentially throws him a bone and hires him to work at the trucking company. So it's a story really for him of quiet acceptance, of slowly owning up to who he is and to his fate, because it is a very kind of a fatal fate in a way that he knows, in a sense, he knows that it's all going to go horribly wrong. Because the 3rd generation in any empire, they say the 3rd generation wrecks it, and that's basically what happens. So there's a kind of a sense of doom to his accepting of his role. Adam being the seasoned actor that he is, and Gaga being such an emotional and passionate performer, I think they really kind of learned a lot from each other, actually. I think Adam is so controlled in a good way. I mean, he's so in control of his instrument, of his acting, and Gaga, could really kind of go from an explosive take to a much more subtle take and really feel the scene as it was happening. So to watch them together was really quite amazing, just in terms of how they were dancing with each other. And of course, the fact that a lot of the film was shot chronologically, and so you really felt that the relationship was deteriorating as it was happening. And I thought that was a very clever scheduling idea. Rodolfo Gucci is played by Jeremy Irons. He's the patriarch of the family, and even though he's a Gucci and he had a pretty important role in the family business and in the fashion business, he's actually he's an actor. He had a career as a pretty successful silent actor. His pseudonym was Maurizio d'Arcora, and he met Maurizio's mother, Alessandra, who was also an actress, while they were filming some of these short films, or silent films rather. And so Rodolfo has a foot in the past. He's a very melancholic man, and he's incredibly protective of Maurizio, who's his only child. And Maurizio's mother passed away when Maurizio was 5 years old, so there's no mother figure in his life. And Rodolfo is very protective to the point where Maurizio feels like really he can't live his life, and that's a big reason why he rebels against his father. Jeremy, in my mind, is the personification of elegance and of dignity, and he can kill you with a look. He has this incredible intensity to him, and there's a scene in the film when Maurizio and Patrizia have lunch with Jeremy, with Rodolfo, and just watching Jeremy watch Patrizia is a masterclass in nuance, because you know what he's thinking. He's thinking that she's not worthy, but he hides it, and he's very charming in that scene. And there's a lot of layers, and I think only an actor of his caliber and of his subtlety could really kind of beef up that role and add so many subtleties to it. Aldo Gucci is played by an upcoming actor named Al Pacino, who really brought the character to life. And Aldo is he's a snake in the grass, really. He's a very jovial, gregarious man who is taking Gucci in the wrong direction. He's obsessed with profit. He's obsessed with his ego, essentially. And that's one of the things that Patrizia identifies in him and in what he's doing, and one of the reasons why Maurizio ultimately betrays him. But he's a fox. If I had to think of an animal for him, he's a very, very charming, sly fox. And Al has a great a sort of explosive charm to him and a friendliness that is great for the role, because it turns quite dark when we ultimately find out what his motivations are and what he's doing. Well, Aldo is a practical person. Aldo realizes in the 70s, for example, that the Asian market is an incredibly big opportunity for Gucci to grow and to expand and to make a lot of money. And that comes at odds, for example, with Rodolfo's view of what Gucci should be, because Rodolfo thinks it's a museum piece. He thinks that it should be a jewel to be cherished and cared for, whereas Aldo's a little bit more ruthless about it. Paolo is played by Jared Leto, unrecognizable under a ton of prosthetics. I actually never met Jared, I only met Paolo. And he is Aldo's son. He is a very flamboyant, colorful, failed fashion designer. And he's dying to see his ideas and his creations come to life, and finally he wants some sort of recognition for who he is. And he's always been put down by his father and by the family. And when he tries desperately to convince Rodolfo to give him a chance and Rodolfo mocks him, that's the turning point in his character, and that's when he decides he's going to start Paolo Gucci, which is his line. And he's comic but tragic at the same time. And what Jared did with that character was really infuse him with a kind of a pathetic soul and a sense of emotion that I think was very moving, actually. So Jared would wake up at 4 in the morning every day, and he would spend 5 hours in makeup, and he would come on set as Paolo, and he would leave as Paolo, and he would talk to me as Paolo. And to this day, I only receive emails from Paolo. I don't actually communicate with Jared. But his attitude was completely a full commitment. And the thing that I really admired the most about him was he loved this character. He respected this character. He didn't mock him. He didn't demean him in any way. He didn't find humor out of his failings. He took him very seriously. And I think that humor comes out of that, out of the fact that he's delusional. But it doesn't come out of making fun of the character. And I think Jared had the sensitivity to really honor him. And I think he did some incredible work. Pina is played by Salma Hayek. Pina is a psychic who, in the movie, Patrizia phones in to. Pina has this show, late night sort of psychic show. And Patrizia calls because she's an insomniac and she's just eating a tub of ice cream, and she calls in. And they immediately connect. They have this kind of almost like a psychic connection. And they become best friends. It's all about betrayal, and it's all about what people are doing behind the scenes to each other and how they're manipulating each other. And I think there's a lot of great things that they did. I mean, obviously the movie focuses on some of the more salacious details, but the empire, the Gucci empire, is something that truly represents a lot of Italian a lot of Italian culture in the 20th century. I mean, it started in the late 1800s and went on till now. So it's a very important piece of Italian history and of fashion history. The love story at the beginning is a really honest and truthful one, and it's an intimate story. There's no family members involved, there's no media. And that's the section in the film that I think really sells that the relationship is genuine and that Patrizia truly did fall in love with this man. As the family members enter the canvas, enter the stage, and she realizes that there's an amazing boon to be had in becoming the king and the queen of Gucci. It's a classic story of greed. Greed not only consumes her, it consumes him, it consumes Maurizio, and it consumes the relationship because they can no longer trust each other. Well, I think it's a film that really has its toes in different genres. It's a movie, if you like crime thrillers, it's a crime thriller. It's a fashion gangster movie in a way. It's a love story gone horribly wrong. It's a snapshot of 20 years of fashion. And if you love fashion and you want to see the Italian scene in the 80s, which is really where all those great designers came from, the Versaces and the Armanis and the Ferrés, it's also a time machine, and it brings you back to that time. So it's the wonderful thing about it is that it really kind of taps onto different things, and it doesn't feel like we were constrained to just one genre. Well, I think because Ridley's a painter, and not only is he a masterful director, he's also a painter, and the amount of detail that goes into every frame and every location and every costume is incredible. And I think it's important to honor that and to really give the film the kind of attention that it deserves. And we don't really see movies like this one anymore. It's an experience. It's like a wonderful meal, and you want to really sit down and enjoy it and have a glass of wine with it and really feel like you're in Italy in the 70s and the 80s again. Well, I think it runs the gamut emotionally, and I think you're left with a real sense of loss and a kind of a bittersweet feeling of how love sometimes can take really tragic, unexpected turns. And in that sense, as I described earlier, it has this kind of Shakespearean grandiosity and depth. When you read Romeo and Juliet, I don't think you leave feeling good about love. But you definitely feel, and I think that's the key, that the movie really is going to make people feel a lot. It's the quintessential Italian story about the quintessential Italian fashion brand, and the details in the locations and the food and the lighting and the costumes, everything is so reflective of Italy. And one of the most fun things for me was watching all these cars come back to life, these amazing sports cars and things that I had written as a fanboy, as a car enthusiast, and all of a sudden, right there in front of me was the Lamborghini Countach or the Alfa Romeo Spider or the Fiat. And so I think Italy is such a rich country in terms of its arts and its culture. So this really is also an homage to that, an ode to Italian creativity in a sense.
This is based on a book by Sarah Fordham, The House of Gucci. It was brought to my attention, funnily enough, by my wife, who's a producer, has done several things, not with me. So this would be the first thing I've ever done with Janina. And she said, this is a really interesting story. And that was 20 years ago. So in the 20 years, we've been trying to get it written where you have the balance of what actually happened with the personal side of the story which is constantly offset against the evolution of the business. And so it was an interesting thing of a family history, a grand family history, almost Italian royalty in the fashion industry, which led to destruction of the family. I used to buy my mother little Gucci presents every Christmas. And so I knew a lot about the Gucci evolution as a product, as a franchise. And so I didn't have to do much research. I've been right through that. I lived through everything in the 60s. I was at the Royal College of Art in the 60s. There's no one better than the Royal College of Art in the 60s, trust me. So I'd been through it. And so the next step is to bring my designers to bear to it, which will be Janti, which is the clothing, and then the production designer, Arthur Max, where we can both identify the places and the time and what they might be, and of course what the fashion would be, because that becomes very important, and I think it's taken quite an important part in the film. I think Janti got it really well done, and even though we looked at early Gucci stuff, and it was really impressive. The early Gucci stuff is very impressive. It's a young woman who is looking for a guy to marry, and I don't want to paint it in a misleading way, but she was certainly a girl about town who would enjoy her nightclubs and that thing, but she still lived with her parents at home. One day she met a man at a club who called himself Maurizio. She had no idea who this was, other than the fact he was extraordinarily polite, which she was not used to. Men aren't necessarily polite with girls in nightclubs and things like that. So she was impressive. She was impressed by him. This leads to, of course, her finding out who he is. And the Gucci in those days family would be just one step above or below royalty in Italy. So she suddenly realized how important he was, and I think she really went after him. You watch that evolution into, and I believe, if you're going to be very simplistic about it, it was love at first sight. I started to be very curious about Stefania, particularly when I saw A Star Is Born, and I thought there's more here than her talent, a formidable talent as an entertainer and as a singer, as a producer and a writer of her own show. This is a real engine of creativity. And so I met with her, and she came to the office, and I liked her immediately, and she was fascinated immediately, and that's how it began. Sometimes a singer can also be a natural actor or actress, because that's what they do on stage when they're singing. They're so inside their own words as she writes them. So she's writing her own play, which she then sings. So in a funny kind of way, it's not a stone's throw, less than a stone's throw away from, if you're getting a script, can you just act and not sing? And so that became very apparent, that she was very superlatively prepared for every line, more than normal in the whole story. So she didn't miss a beat on a line. What the hell, let's just give Roberto a go. And within about 6 weeks, I was reading this on a Saturday morning thinking, holy shit, he nailed it. And that's how it happened. So it was all Roberto's doing in terms of how he saw it. Adam Driver is a rare breed. He's one of the best in the business right now, and they come and go and they evolve and settle down, or evolve and keep getting better. And Adam has evolved for a while now, and it just keeps getting better. So I went from medieval, where I think I got on quite well with him. I think he was shocked at the speed I worked, and what's interesting is he liked it. I think Maurizio was a very sheltered child, and then youth, and then as a young man was overtly protected by Rodolfo, his father. Rodolfo, Jeremy Irons, is older than Al. Al is the slightly flash Harry of the Brotherhood who goes to New York and sets up sets up the empire, the beginning of the empire. Rodolfo stays in Milan and Rome, mostly Milan, where he's happy and content with his very posh, high-end business. And I think he secretly never wanted to be a shopkeeper. He calls himself, I'm a shopkeeper. What he wanted to be was an actor. And he had been a film actor where he'd married a star in the 20s who was a German actress who became a star in Italy, and where he fell deeply in love with her at a very young age, and she died of cancer at a very young age. So it's as if she was, engraved forever in that beautiful woman. So the sadness was he would watch all the films with her night after night. With Maurizio, you're already starting off with a teen young man who's getting damaged by his father's almost manic obsessive thing with the past. And that's where we begin. And Maurizio, the father, wants to be a lawyer. He doesn't want to be in the business. Maurizio does not want the business because he can see the business has kind of affected his father in a rather chronic fashion. His father never wanted to be the shopkeeper. He wanted to be the actor. So he sees a father who is only filled with regret. And that's where it starts. Patrizia, by the time she's 22, 23, is a girl about town for sure. And I don't want to say more than that because I don't know, but she certainly was an experienced woman, young woman, and had boyfriends, and none of them quite fitted the bill. And I think when she came across Maurizio, there was a freshness to him that I think endeared her to him, and so she became very impressed with him. When she knew it was the Gucci, it was like she really wanted to be part of his life. How do I cast the two brothers? I'll have wanted to work with forever and ever and ever, because without question he's a goddamn icon. And I'd worked with Jeremy before. I did Kingdom of Heaven. Jeremy played one of the powerhouses in Jerusalem at the time of Saladin. And so I was familiar with Jeremy's elegance. And I wanted the brother to be superlatively elegant and happy to live as a gentleman. Shopkeeper, he would never hit me if I said he was a shopkeeper, but Gucci as a shop, it's a shop, it sells clothing. It's a fashion house, is the better way of putting it. I don't think he thought about that. He thought it as a way, because in those days, they'd be selling leather goods, handbags, luggage, etc., etc. They hadn't quite shifted gear to the fashion house. Aldo was of the other school, slightly younger, was a bad boy about town, loved the women, and was a constant playboy, but at the same time was evolving the business in a quite different way than his brother in Milan. So that was chalk and cheese. They're quite different. Al comes off piste when you're writing, you've written something, you got the scene flying, and he loves to ad-lib. So he comes off the ski slope and you ad-lib on the side. But what's happening is you're getting rosebuds falling from his mouth every 2 or 3 seconds, so you let him run. And then sometimes if he goes on a bit, I'll say, come back on. So you then suddenly come back on the scene complete and finished. So then I can look at it after and say, oh my God, I got it. So it's a cherry picking, it's a rose picking thing of saying, that's marvelous and that's marvelous. So he's a great ad-libist. But you can't let him go on too long. You've got to come back on the story. And that to me was one of my best experiences, because Al, considering who he is a bit of a tour de force in American cinema and theater. That he was the nicest man who could easily be difficult. but I don't tolerate difficult anymore because I don't have to either. but I got on great with him. Paolo is written in a very amusing fashion. It's nearly satire. In fact, I think a lot of this, I was pushing this film slightly in the direction of being satirical. And it certainly is between the father, Aldo, and Paolo. And I always liked the idea that Paolo's an idiot, but I put the line in, my son's an idiot. Paolo's an idiot, but he's my idiot. So, however, the shortfall on Paolo was Aldo would always love him as a son, even having put him in prison. Right? I like that. I love that connection. So it means Aldo's a good man. We had some research material, and Paolo looked just like that. I said, "How are you going to do this?" He said, "Well, makeup." I said, "That's the hardest makeup to do, to put it on from here to here. So you're doing that, and you're going to get creases. It's the hardest thing to do." We found a genius in Scandinavia who we were able to have this done every morning. He was there at 4:30 a.m. with a 4-hour makeup. Then he arrived on the set looking, okay, let's go. And there he was, and he was a completely different person. Maurizio is really smart. But Maurizio is very defensive and fragile because he doesn't like to be pushed around and be put in the place where he doesn't want to be. And his father wants that for him all the time. And that's where it drives them apart. Paolo was had completely overestimated his talent as a designer. And in fact wasn't much as a fashion designer in the way that fashion was going at that particular moment. So in other words, he was slightly out of fashion, and even the clothes he wore were very OTT, over the top. And so the family were always slightly embarrassed about him wanting to be part of the Gucci thing and design clothing for Gucci, because they couldn't have that under the Gucci label. Pina was an actual TV late night, I'll tell you a fortune person in Italy at the time. So what we did was literally what she was, what you see, we simply copied her setup on television. That's what she did. And she would talk to the audience at night saying, pick up the phone, call me now, and I'll tell you where you're going, and I'll read your fortune. I won't necessarily tell you, you won't necessarily hear good news, but I'm going to tell you what I think the truth is. And off that impressed Patrizia. But Patrizia wasn't hoping anything. The way I did it was, she was sitting there one night, sitting in the kitchen, and can't sleep because of various things. And maybe he's already starting to get anxious about the relationship. And already stepping further than she should be. And seeing Pina on television and going, let's talk to him. And it's random. The random things start to evolve. And so I've known Salma for a number of years, and I thought, I asked her, would you do this small part? But I'd love to have you do it. And she did. She can then admire richness that she hasn't got and want to be sophisticated. She wants part of that. But she feels she may never have that, because if she were the fact she doesn't have that kind of class. So she's reaching for the class that she might not ever attain. In many respects, she didn't, even though she was adored by a lot of people, because she was such a she was a bit of a showstopper when she was younger. So she looked good on his arm. So he felt good by having her on his arm. And don't forget, he was probably very much in love with her. I met Darius. I know him through my eldest son. And he was great. And Darius can cope with any number of cameras. He just flies with the ball. And so we're a very, very efficient team. And it all looks beautiful. Arthur and I have known each other, 35, 40 years. And I started by doing Pepsi Cola commercials. Arthur's a new boy on the block, and I've now already got a company that's my company's 54 years old. Arthur, 54 years old. I formed it when I was 27. And so Arthur Max Kimberly's from a guy from Max, and hey, I need to do. I said, okay, we'll try him out. He was good. But I always had 2 or 3 really good designers working with me because I was a good designer, so I know it. And Arthur gradually evolved into doing lots of the big ones. And then we just stayed together on the big ones because as I'm coming out of one, I'm already prepping another one.
My name is Dariusz Wolski, and I was a cinematographer on latest release project, House of Gucci. We're inspired with William Klein, who was famous from like high fashion from way back to 60s and 70s and 80s. And in the 80s, he started doing a lot of kind of black and white, rough pictures from backstage of fashion shows, and that's what we found the most fascinating. That, you know, on the one hand you have this glamour, beautifully lit dressed girls, and backstage you have them half dressed with cigarettes, you know, just half naked, rush. Everything is just really informal and lots of pressure, and he captured it beautifully. Yeah, but there's nothing glamorous about it. It's just like hard work. You know, you have to change your costume every 5 seconds, go out there, come back, and so that was just kind of our visual inspiration. It's a story of the girl who was raised up by the family that under pressure that she has to marry somebody famous and rich, you know, and it was kind of, it's maybe not even shown in the film, but it was kind of her mother's idea. She was basically raised up that way, and then she just goes to this party and stumbles upon the guy who kind of looks a little bit nerdish, a little bit insecure, and she takes him for a waiter, you know, and it turns out it's later on in the kitchen she opens a newspaper, she finds out it's Gucci. In the movie you don't quite know if she knows who he is or not, which is kind of interesting. And then he doesn't want to have anything to do with with the family, because family is two brothers, which is one of which is father, played by Jeremy Irons, and another is Aldo, played by Al Pacino. So they're kind of in conflict how to run the company, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And she's falling in love with him because of who he is. There's way more than photography, you know. It's really hard to. It's such a, you know. There's costumes, there's performances, there's script, there's actors, there's production design. All this amounts to capturing the world, and there's also a great juxtaposition from like very opulent wealth to the way she came from. I mean, she was coming from a poor family, but completely different class, social class. So there's a bit of that, and then you have opulence. We went to Italian Alps, and so that's really beautiful. Then we shot this beautiful house in Lake Como, which is Paolo, Al Pacino's place. Really spectacular. I mean, locations were spectacular. So just, you know, shooting in the great light, and don't mess with it. You just don't have to do much. It's there, you know. I always believed the photography should be just very observant and not imposing. Garçonnet was snow, so there was, when we scouted, it was beautiful, it was plenty of snow. Of course, then temperatures went up and everything started melting, but still all the mountain slope stuff, there was real snow, but the roads we had to snow up a little bit. We had to do a little bit of artificial snow, and also there's a beautiful scene when she leaves when the snow is falling, and some of it was fake and some of it was real, quite amazing. Yeah. Arthur has a phenomenal knowledge of, you know, architecture and history, and always does his homework, very specific about period, about what stuff should look like, it's architecture-wise, cars, detail and stuff. Yeah. And then Janti comes in with her clothes, was, I think, the best costume designer I've ever worked with. And exceptional. She can just do 14th century France, and next day you have custom-made suits for all, glamorous suits for all actors and stuff, and dresses for Lady Gaga. Amazing research into vintage Gucci stuff, so that takes a lot of work, and finding stuff and getting them from Gucci and copying it and making suits for actors, for Al Pacino, for everybody, and of course the Patrizia's wardrobe was phenomenal. A part of being Lady Gaga and having this huge commercial draw, whatever, she's very serious about what she does as an actress. She's done a lot of homework. She used to come on the set, really prepared. Very thorough, professional actress. Like this whole Lady Gaga as a huge, pop star. She was completely focused on what she was doing, which is remarkable. Adam is just, he's a great actor, and what is beautiful what he does is just development of his character from like a young kid who just doesn't want to have anything to do with the family, then falls in love genuinely with a girl, a very simple girl, fights with his father over it, and then gets drawn into the whole family intrigue and stuff, and becomes, takes over the family and the company. Al Pacino. He's a legend, and just fantastic. I understand, what he's trying to do. He's trying to set the stage, set the event, whatever that is, for people talking, fashion show, two women talking, somebody getting killed. You set the event, and he's very particular how he rehearses what's going to happen, where, and then you basically, I'm watching it. Usually he's watching it from one side, I'm watching from another side, and then we just decide how we're going to cover it. And there's always room to put 4 cameras. Sometimes there isn't, but you'll be surprised. Actually, there is. And then in the beginning maybe you put 3 cameras wide, and then once you shoot those wide shots, medium wide shots to capture the scene, it's very obvious what you need. So you just come in with the cameras and do tighter coverage. And it also what does, actors can, first of all, they have to be on the game all the time because you're rolling, so it's not like the old school, I'm waiting for my close-up, I'm gonna go take it easy and now it's my close-up. No. It's your close-up and it's your acting partner's close-up at the same time. And that would actually, most of the actors love it. They love it because they just give a performance once. The great thing about Ridley is that he is also a very visual person, and he understands the lighting. So you basically light the environment, and you set the thing up the way that, if somebody's silhouette, it's okay, But when it matters, then there's a close-up. Then you see her eye, or 2 eyes, and so it's just understanding how this scene evolves, And there's always like couple silhouettes, beautiful atmospheric shots, and then when you go into the story, then it's just how you place actors and stuff, and it's great with him because as much as he allows them to do actors to do what they want to do, he also is very conscious where to put them, so also works for the light, so it's helpful. It's a style of telling the story, And sometimes you have to stop it. Sometimes, and he knows it too. Sometimes you just stop. You say, okay, now this is it. Now this is going to be one shot in the story, and just do one shot. You have all those cameras. So okay, forget it, guys. Just one, and that's okay too. But if you establish a 4-camera shot as a normal way of making movies, then those single cameras, the steady cameras or cranes, they become just like special. They become even more powerful. I think they'll just enjoy it. because it's a great entertainment with a bit of a cautionary tale about greed and manipulations and jealousy and stuff. But it's in there's some in the end it's tragic, but it's funny. It's funny, has a great sense of humor. It's a movie about characters. It's a movie about dysfunctional family. That's what it is, And it's about passion and jealousy and greed and manipulation and there's some there's also sad moments too. It's like everything. It had like different times has different importance, because first it was a leather company and then became kind of like Hollywood and Italian glam, because in the 60s the whole Hollywood and Italian glam was very intertwined, so a lot of Hollywood stars spent time in Rome and vice versa. So the scarves and shoes, that was just like a big thing, carrying around all the famous people used to wear them, and then scarves.
Goes back a long way in development at Scott Free through Janina Falcio, who had the project in development. I think I read the first draft 10 years ago. And they've been trying to find the right combination of cast for a while, and also the right timing for everybody else to get involved. And happily it came together with Lady Gaga and as the lead. And she was, the perfect casting, and it was well worth waiting for it. It's very, very familiar territory for me, having grown up in New York and lived through the 70s there, and the whole ambience of fashion photography, merchandising, and it's so much part of my New York experience in Manhattan, where I grew up. And so I was very familiar with fashion photography. I worked for a few fashion photographers in the 70s who were doing Harper and Vogue, Bazaar, kind of editorial for fashion. And so, this was a world I knew, not to mention the music world where I originally came from, and everything that went with that. So, it was very comfortable for me. We had the New York flagship store to recreate, which we did in Rome. Of course, you do that in Rome. And we had to go to also the mountains, the Alps. That was a little unfamiliar to me. It snows a lot in New York, which was good training, but I hadn't done a lot of work in high altitude. And it was very, very high. It was, probably the highest peaks in the Italian Alps. We were very close to the French Alps, just over the hill from where we shot in the Gressenay Valley is your Mont Blanc, one of the highest French Alps. So we were up there. We had the evolution from 70s, 80s, and 90s fashion to deal with, and the actual product evolution of Gucci style. And also we did some other fashion shows of other designers to set some of the scenes and the ambience of the world that Maurizio finds himself in. And he's a novice, really, to the world of high fashion at that time. So we did a lot of research. We looked at a lot of magazine still photography to see the style of lighting, and also a lot of video footage of actual fashion shows of the period. Because, they had a particular style of, the lighting equipment was different, the presentation style was different, the music was different. and it evolved it evolves as we go through the film. She comes from a successful working class family. Her father is quite a successful trucking company operator. There could be some, suggestion, not that we know for sure, of, some kind of outside influences of a darker shade. But he has money, not a lot of taste, but a lot of money. So she's spoiled rotten. He's spoiling her. You can see that in the wedding scene. I mean, it's no expense spared for his darling daughter, but she's not satisfied on that level. She has ambitions to rise socially. She wants more. I think she's the engine of the story. That desire to rise socially and also, dragging Maurizio along with her initially. He's completely indifferent, but gets with the program. And she's the power behind, the man. She's kind of a Lady Macbeth in a way. And, he becomes really the destroyer of the dynasty, and destroys himself in the process. So it's really Shakespearean and operatic, isn't it? Really has this habit of shooting with, 4, 5 cameras at a time, which is his method. So we need a bit more space. And so we did that. We dedicated certain rooms for certain scenes, just went with that. We shot outside. We had beautiful, crisp fall weather by the pool in the gardens. The reflection of the real Gucci wealth, which we tried to show with Rodolfo, the Jeremy Irons character, the elder brother, and also with Aldo's lifestyle in New York through his offices and the scenes we shot of him in his villa on Lake Como, which was extraordinary. We found this villa right on the lake, beautiful kind of Renaissance, Palladian style, with beautiful antique furnishings inside. I mean, just to drop dead and die and go to heaven for. And that was the level, the higher echelon level, that Ridley wanted to show. Remember the balcony scene with Patrizia on the balcony. And for me, that was the most fun, because I got to pick and choose what art to put on the wall, because we wanted it to be very contemporary. Now we're in the 80s, so we're in the height of pop art world. So we're, decorating in a very, very slick, contemporary style, minimalistic, with lots of very well-known pop artists on the walls, which was really fun for me, because I was there in New York when all of that was first happening, and very enthusiastic fan of pop art. And yeah, it was, a fun movie to design. We had the corporate Gucci helping us to some degree, in that they let us film in the Rome flagship Gucci store on Via Condotti, where we shot interior and exterior there, which was fantastic fun. But we created Via Condotti, which is in Rome, as the street that it would have been on in Milan, which is Via Monte Napoleone, which is the kind of mecca of high fashion in Italy, and where the events actually took place. Paolo Gucci's, like the cuckoo in the nest of the Gucci family, I'd have to say, on every level. And, the kind of fashion designer manqué, failed designer, and the kind of family, burden, and the comic relief of the film. Congratulations to Jancy on what she pulled together over the whole arc of the movie, the whole panorama of fashion that evolves. in every section of storytelling. House of Gucci is the 15th film I've done with Ridley, so I guess we have a way of working together that seems to satisfy him and everyone else. I don't know that there's anyone who's done more to shape the way we see film and make film in terms of the craft of it than he has. It's really a lot of fun. It's a rollicking romp, to follow these characters and how they interact and how totally spoiled rotten they are and how horribly it all goes wrong. And it's all to the sounds of the period, in interesting takes on the sounds and the sights of the period and that world that they lived in, which was one of the more fun periods of modern times. It's just, very, very enjoyable. It's a sad, sad tale told in a very, I think, entertaining and lighthearted way, with moments of, seriousness, but generally it's fun watching other people fall apart at the seams, and how the mighty have fallen is always enjoyable. Say it's a cautionary tale about, greed and being satisfied with your own lot in life and enjoying it for what it is and taking simple pleasures from life that, all the money in the world doesn't necessarily, it's the old cliche, it leads to happiness, and sometimes it leads to disaster, total and complete. You'd have to say that a lot of the success of the production design as it appears on the screen to the people who worked with me in my department and the team that I had in the arts department and set decorating department, prop making department, all Italian, with a few exceptions, the odd Irish lady, the odd German here and there, some other European EU country people, but mostly all Italian. I mean, they were so enthusiastic about the subject because it's their legacy, their history, and they put so much into it on a level of enthusiasm and tirelessness that I have to, tip my hat and be very grateful for their collaboration.
My name is Göran Lundström. I'm the prosthetics designer for Jared Leto for House of Gucci. I could travel to Italy where they were filming, and I felt like, well, it's not enough time really to do a really good job, but I don't normally get these kinds of requests. So I figured I'll do it anyway. I'll just have to work a lot. And so I think I got my agent called me on a Thursday. I had a Zoom meeting with Jared on Thursday night, and then on Friday I got the job. And then I had 3 weeks until test makeup, and then 4 weeks until shooting, which was not a lot of time for doing a character makeup. Usually in movies I get asked about, I don't need to change the character and make it totally believable. A lot of times it's fantasy or it can be just a partial change. This was like complete character change. And I didn't even know that from the beginning that Jared did not want to look like himself at all, which is pretty rare. Most of the times you want to see the actor in the makeup. So you want to feel like it's another character, but it's still that actor. And it took me a while to figure out that Jared was actually asking me to, not in direct words, but he just didn't want to see himself in this makeup. That he was totally unrecognizable, which is really rare. He was playing Paolo Gucci, and Paolo Gucci looks very specific, with his long hair and his bald head and mustache. So we knew we wanted to go in that direction. And we looked at a lot of the pictures of Paolo, and then Jared picked the ones he liked the most. So he kind of explained what he liked with the longer hair and stuff like that. But Jared's head shape is very different from Paolo, so it could never be a portrait of Paolo. It was basically trying to hide Jared and trying to make him feel more like Paolo. The test is always trying to figure out what doesn't work. You usually don't look at it and go like, yeah, it works. It's usually like, oh, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. You have a whole list of things you want to change. And it was the same thing here. And I think I worked 21 days straight from when I got the job until I stuck it on him. So I worked every day I had the chance to work. I think the challenge here was the fact that it was a drama, which usually is more sensitive, because if something looks funny or looks weird, you're taking out of the story immediately. And then that he was going to be the only actor in any kind of prosthetics. A lot of times you have subtle prosthetics on several people, but here we had one who had a massive prosthetics and wasn't supposed to look like the actor we know, next to Al Pacino or Lady Gaga, which is like a horrible thing for a makeup artist. Like, wow, how am I going to pull this off? He went from age like 47 to 54 in the story, and we looked at pictures around the time, and then you pick the look that you prefer, and the actor, in this case Jared, preferred, so we wanted to stick to that one. So we didn't have to do that much research into the period in itself, because like costume is different, but here we definitely just took a cue from the pictures we saw, the ones we liked. Paolo Gucci is a very unique character. He's a very happy, positive person, even though he clinches with the family, the Gucci family. He's one of the families, but he wants to start his own brand. He wanted to be in character really early, so he wanted us to call him Paolo, so he felt he was in character. But I've seen actors go through transformations, like once you start getting the paint on the makeup, they start changing their voice. Here it was more, he came, said good morning, and we started makeup, and then if we wanted to address him, we addressed him as Paolo, and his voice did change a little bit during the makeup, but it was more like we were helping him get in character as well. And that's why we did the makeup separately from the makeup crew. We did the makeup in his apartment most of the time, so he would arrive on set in character. I think there were two really big challenges with this makeup. First of all, having one big prosthetic makeup on a really famous actor in a film when no one else is in makeup, and also a well-known face that people actually recognize. That's a big challenge. The other challenge for technical was the fact that I didn't meet Jared until we did the test makeup. We got feedback from Ridley that he was happy with everything. So it's very short feedback, and it felt really good because Ridley's such an artistic director. And I felt this is what artists do. They either like it or they don't like it. It's the non-artistic people a lot of times who come up with all these ideas about what you should change. You know, they usually have a lot of, they're guessing basically. But the artistic ones, they usually know what they like, you know, if it's gonna work. So I was really happy that he liked it.
I got involved when Ridley mentioned this project whilst we were doing his previous film this year, which was The Last Duel. We were just coming up to finishing that project, and Ridley mentioned that he'd like me to score this movie. Now, I'd seen that he was about to go off and shoot it, so I was really hoping he'd say, would you like to do it? And indeed he did. And he said at that point, it's going to be kind of interesting musically. So that's kind of like a red rag to a bull. When I saw his first cut of the film, I was really blown away with the characterizations on screen, but I was also a little perplexed as to where I was going to fit into this, since there are a lot of needle drops, what we call needle drops in this movie, so a lot of existing songs, and very little score. Where there was score, or where Ridley and I decided there should be score, I was going to be super important. But unlike, say, a movie like The Martian that we did together, there must have been 90 minutes of score in that. In this movie, not at all that volume of music. So it was a question of finding how I would fit into the musical picture overall. So it was quite obvious to begin with, once I'd heard here was a Blondie song, here was a David Bowie song, here was some opera. There's a little bit of jazz in there. So there's a lot of flavor to the soundtrack. And my in really was the emotional pull between the two main characters, which is quite flirtatious, quite casual to begin with. And then Patrizia gets her claws into him a little bit deeper, and things get a bit more interesting. My job really with the music was to tap into the connection between the two main characters. And quite often scoring a film like this, one would be scoring, maybe have some themes for some of the peripheral characters. On this occasion, that wasn't necessary for me. It was more from the point of view of Maurizio and Patrizia. The score, the concept for the score wasn't that it would sound like a piece of Italian music. Again, the characterization of Patrizia as someone who starts very much as someone who falls in love and then starts to get a handle on the business and the money involved. So the score charts that progress of the emotion between those two and how it goes off the rails ultimately. Lady Gaga is fantastic, but she's not the only one who's fantastic. The cast is really amazing. You'd have to say that Al Pacino was born to play the part he plays. I mean, he's Pacino. I can only imagine he has some roots in Italy. And as we covered, Jared Leto is a complete hoot. And Adam Driver is solid, man. It's really great. And it was great fun for me to see him on screen.
Working with Ridley is so inspiring because he knows exactly what he likes and what he doesn't like, and is never dull. So he had very strong opinion about the way he wants the character to look like, and not necessarily have to be kind of the iconic look. So apart from Patrizia and her husband, it's like they really look much like the real character. But for the rest, I think we had to be more fun to play and to take even different direction as well. So I think what he said to me, he didn't want anything boring. So this is what we did. We, actually push ourselves a bit more than the actual original character of the movie. My Bible was Vogue Italia. So I went through all Vogue Italia I could in time, and again, because really want something very, very fashion as well. So it was very important to have massive research about all the catwalk of the time. So the Versace, the Gucci, especially when Tom Ford, start to be, the designer of Gucci. So it was a lot about, I think, looking at fashion and glamour magazine of the time. Paolo Gucci was very much like on him, the way he looked like. So we tried to make Jared looking very much similar to the Paolo one. And I have to say, Goran, who was, the prosthetic designer for Jared, he did an amazing job, because it's very tricky to make someone look similar to someone else without looking them a little bit funny. It's a very fine line, and he thought that it's meshed. I mean, he did so well. It looked fantastic. The beginning is like a very late Dolce Vita, so it's all very kind of matte colors, very pale, nice skin, red lips, and the classic eyeliner. And then we go through the 70s, which for me is like Studio 54. So it's all about, color, pop of color, like sparkling, glimmer, of course, a little bit of craziness. And then we go to, of course, like the 90s, late 90s, which is more like Tom Ford. And again, it's totally changed, because about, like be tan and be glowing and fresh, and a little bit shaggy as well. In Italy, it was a totally different kind of culture compared to the rest of Europe because of being Catholic. So it's interesting seeing this change in Italy. And again, with Tom Ford, he usually, before of that, the woman, they have to look perfect, they have to look pretty, they have to be like in order. And with Tom Ford, they have to look sexy. And I say they look a little bit messy, but they always say it was like a shag look, is what we said. So it's interesting to see even these three different way for a woman to look like. And you can see that even on Patrizia as well. So it's interesting how she started off to be like, the typical Italian young woman, and then she becomes so strong and so powerful and so much aware about who she was. And you can see this even in her makeup and her transition, which, Sarah Tanno, who was looking after her, she did so well, and I'm very happy about it. At the very beginning, she's more like kind of natural makeup, and then slowly, especially after she goes to New York, she got like a total change, say, I'm here, I'm in New York, I want to have fun, I want to meet people, I want to be a Gucci, and I want to represent Gucci in a certain way. And you can definitely see how different she looked, because her makeup started to be stronger. Her liner is all about eyes, I have to say. Sarah, she did a fantastic job on her eyes. They're magnetic. Rodolfo was playing from Jeremy Irons, and he's the odd one in the family. When I was talking to Ridley, he said to me, I really want him to look totally different from the rest of the family. So we kind of keep most of the family kind of tan, the Italian tan look. And he said to me about Rodolfo, I would like him to look very pale and very fragile, like a little flower, and like someone just living his own world. And that's what we did. So it's very interesting because it stands out so much compared to the rest, especially compared to his brother, to Aldo. It's like black and white. So it's very interesting, and it's amazing to see Jeremy and Al acting together. I mean, it's just, yes, very, very special. Aldo is the alpha man. Aldo is what you can imagine about like an Italian man is Aldo. So he's loud, he's full of energy, full of happiness. When he's in the room, he's him, he's a leader. So, I say, and he stand and he love woman. Yes, if you think about anything about the glamour of Italy in the 70s, 80s, it's him. This cast has been brilliant. I mean, when I read the cast list, I said, oh my gosh, it's just epic. And I said before, I mean, looking Al acting is a gift, I have to say, it really is. I would not have thought in my life I was going to, do Al Pacino makeup and spend time with him, and it's so nice. It's always like say thank you, say hello to everybody, and he loved to have fun, and he enjoys so much what he does, and you can tell, it's incredible. We have like two different looks, like a transition. So we start off with a younger Aldo, which still is like, he's 60. So it's he's a man who really look after himself, and he's very vain. So he's all tan, and his hair that kind of, dye in the kind of old school Italian way. So they're very dark, and you can see a bit of like gray roots showing off. And it's always dressed perfectly, and it's all smell nice. It looks very healthy, very glowing, compared to Rodolfo, which looked like, very pale and very fragile. So it's beautiful to see them together, because there's this massive contrast between the two. Looking Salman acting with Lady Gaga was incredible. I mean, the connection the two had with each other was fantastic. And, they were making up things and, found other things to say and to do. So it was very interesting. The first time we see Pina, she's actually on the television, and she'll be younger. And, she has like full on makeup on, like, that kind of 80s blush, like, like here, and a lot of lip gloss, and still she looked cool, and she looked so hypnotic as well. Hypnotic. So you look at her, and she's like, and she grabbed your attention so much. And this, I think, what happened to Patrizia when she looked her the first time on the television, because this is where she kind of first know about her. For Paolo Gucci, it was very important to have like a specific person looking after just him and creating just his look, because we're shooting like in COVID time, we didn't have very much time. So what's happening was very tricky and definitely more complicated than it was before COVID. So the right person to the job was Goran Lutmur. Is incredible. I mean, I cannot say how much incredible it is. You know, he worked so hard with his team, endless hour, with a very short time to prep what he achieved. I think he did absolutely like a miracle. Because Jared wanted to come to set, fair enough, all ready, you know, with costume on and, you know, ready to go. He just wanted us to see him as a Paolo, which, you know, I think is pretty incredible. So of course his time was spread with, you know, prosthetic, hair and costume was all together. So, you know, it was quite long, but it was all together. And I say it was incredible to see him come, you know, as a Paolo Gucci, and he was always in character. Working with Camille Cotin, which is playing, you know, the Paola Franchi, and that was very interesting because her, you know, she's brunette and Ridley wanted her to be blonde like the original Paola. So it wasn't a challenge, but it was interesting to make such a big change on Camille Cotin, and she looked amazing. And Milan was very special to me because we shot a lot of the family, the Gucci family there, and but the most iconic part for me was the Garda, when we did actually the lunch where Patrizia has been introduced to the Gucci family. So you could see the whole family together, and that was incredible because then you can see all the different characters. So you can see, of course, Paolo, and you can see his wife, which used to be an opera singer, and she was American. So you can see she's a bit different from the rest, the way she looked. And then we have, say, Patrizia trying to look more like similar to them to be accepted from the family Gucci. I always say that Ridley is the youngest director I ever met. I mean, his enthusiasm, his vision is contagious. I mean, he's never gonna tell you something dull. He's never gonna want to use something easy and simple. He's never is cool. So you always have to be prepared for everything. But it's incredible because it really pushes you to do better, if you know what I mean. It doesn't like to play safe. You say, why are we, you know, this is boring, I don't like this. So it is incredible. I mean, I think it is unique. It really is. There is everything in this movie, you know. There is the drama, there is the friendship, there is the betrayed, there is the glamour, there is the fun. So there is you never get bored, you know, during the movie. I say when I was reading the script, even when we were shooting, I say I love this movie. You know, I say you're never gonna have like a dull moment during the period of time you watch the movie. You're always gonna be like, oh my God, what's gonna happen now?
My name is Janty Yates and I'm the costume designer on the film. The thing is, it's a true story. And it's a true story that nobody knows except the whole of Italy and Sicily and Sardinia, etc. And everyone knows about every detail. But now to bring it to a bigger audience is fantastic. I always research the granny out of every project I do. However, Ridley and I always say, well, we were there because we're a little older than most of the crew, so we have first-hand experience. However, there was a very big amount to research the Italian way of life, the designs of that time. I mean, Italian design was just busting out all over. And we cover that in the film in a huge way. We had a lot of conversation, and he always briefs me very thoroughly. He's very, very into costume. He really loves it, which is just, it's such a joy for somebody like me to have someone who actually really cares about the costume. And he didn't want us to go down the Joan Collins Dallas dynasty sort of route. He wanted us to be more Gina Lollobrigida, slightly earlier, which of course we couldn't do with the profiles, but we could do with that feel for LG. And also the males, he wanted them to be fairly dandy, I think is the description. And so that was great fun. I had so much fun designing this film. We were able to do a lot of shapes and a lot of different sizings before we even got to see by Zoom LG, which we did 4 times. And so on the first Zoom, which was Ridley, Janina, myself and LG, I was kind of nervous because she's known for her out there costumes, let's face it. And she said, I want to be like my mother. And her mother's Italian. And I went, that's so great, because Ridley doesn't want you to be over the top. You know, that will come with hair and makeup and eyelashes and stuff like that. And we kept the costumes down to a dull raw. He started in the Savoy in London, or he got a job as a bellboy in the Savoy in London. And he noticed, you know, these 18 cases for the rich that he'd be carting up to their suites. So he thought, And he went back to Italy and he started very small, making small briefcases and overnight bags. And it just literally grew from there. We were very lucky. Gucci Archive opened up for us, which was fabulous. And then we were able to send them to LA and try them on LG. And she fit, all of them, perfectly, extraordinarily. She looked wonderful. And we used a good couple of their outfits. I was also able to tap into the Italian costume houses. They had amazing archives. And 2 of them, Torelli and Animode, had wonderful archives. We were buying, Lady Gaga has her own amazing archives of costume. It came from everywhere. Patrizia Gucci was not a huge Gucci wearer. She loved Yves Saint Laurent, funnily enough. So, and they told me that at the Gucci archives when on our first visit. I think one of the most famous women in the world is playing one of the most famous women in Italy. Lady Gaga is playing Patrizia, and she is fantastic. She is so good. She was a wonderful collaborator. She's so on it when it comes to fashion. When it comes to garments, clothing, costume, we would have fittings and we would fit, normally it's just bish bosh, that fits, you know, sort of thing. But we would do it to the last earring, and that would be her look for that particular scene. So Maurizio is played by Adam Driver, and he's very similar to Maurizio in the flesh, actually. He was a very classical dresser, always Savile Row, beautiful fabrics, glorious, you know, always Gucci ties, of course, glorious, just lovely, lovely clothes. He was a joy to dress. Aldo was what we would call a dandy. He had big striped shirts that would go horizontal, not vertical even. Big ties, check suits. Paolo, who is played by Jared Leto, who was extraordinarily changed by the amazing prosthetics team. And but we were calling Al Pacino a dandy. he was a dandy's dandy. And I was able to get the wonderful tailors who made all the suits in The Great Beauty. They made all of Jared's suits. Bigger checks, bigger stripes, louder shirts, everything a bit clashy, you know, but he looked terrific, he really did. And then with this total, complete change in hair and makeup and hair and face, really. It was spectacular. Jeremy Irons was just wearing Savile Row suits and Gucci dressing gowns because he was quite ill for the amount of time we filmed him. Not literally, but in the script. My favourite was the bridal dress. It was glorious. It was all hand done. My team were amazing. Dominic Young's team were amazing. They hand sewed all the lace on. It just looked spectacular. Maurizio's suits, we had 45 made. By suits, I mean probably 30 suits and 14, 15 blazers or sports jackets and trousers, tennis wear, everything. You know, we had, I don't think he had quite as many day appearances in the script. I think he had something like 48. But they were very classic, and they were very, not subdued, because he wears a purple velvet suit in the last couple of scenes. But they were very him, very typical Maurizio, quiet, gentle, lovely. We started with his costumes. I made him a pink corduroy suit, which he actually wears at the beginning of this film, and loved, with a Norfolk jacket, which was hilarious. And then when we went to the Sartoria Cesare Attolini, they're called, in Naples, and we said we need him to make him a dandy. I mean, we were over dandyfying him. He was a dandy's dandy, dandy's dandy, double dandy. And I was going, God, Ridley's going to kill me with these. But in fact, he wore them very well. He was supposed to be an over-the-top type of guy. And actually, if you look at his photo reference, he can look very subdued, but he can wear some quite extreme things. Pina Auriemma was played by the amazing Salma Hayek. And she was hilarious at our first fitting. She said, "No, you don't have anything bad enough. You need something far worse than this." And she was pulling things off the rail and throwing them on. Old ladies' dresses that, you know, you see sewing on the street corner in Sardinia, you know, just old ladies' stuff. It wasn't bad enough for her. She was wonderful, because I thought, oh my God, we're not going to nail this at all, are we? And she was great, and she gets very glamorous because Patrizia takes her out shopping, so we see the glamour side of her as well. Regarding Patrizia's fabric selects, we stayed mainly to silk, and we stayed mainly to upmarket fabrics, because they had all the money in the world, and she would go to the Saint Laurent show, and she would commission clothes like you hear about and you've never done. You know, that was her market. So we kept it very haute, as in haute couture. We kept it up in the fabrics. The patterns were very 80s, very subtle animal skin prints, but on silk. But some beautiful fabrics as well, really beautiful. For Maurizio, I stayed very close to what I know an Italian gentleman would wear. I've been going to Italy all my life, and so I know they love linen, they love silk, and they love silk and linen, and they love cashmere. So it was that. His sweaters were cashmere, his coats were cashmere, most of his suits were a silk mix or wool and silk. Al Pacino, it was a mixture because I wanted a bigger check or a bigger stripe. So it was where these could be found in the colour palette that we had for him, which was kind of a sort of burgundy blue stone. Paolo, we just went mad and we had great fun. We went back twice to the Atelinis and redid all his suits and sports jackets because they were too subtle. We went bigger and bolder and more dandy. Camille Cotin, who plays Paola Franchi, we kept her very classic, very beautiful, and she has the most wonderful figure, Camille. And so she was a joy to dress. And we kept her very elegant, very je ne sais quoi, just lovely. Darius and Arthur and I always sit down at the beginning of a film with Ridley and we decide on a colour palette or a colour palette to which we can nearly aspire. And it's very important because you don't want to put Maurizio in a tan suit and Arthur's covered the walls in a tan suede. You just see his face, etc. You know, it's very important that that is right at the get-go. So Ridley Scott, is the most inspirational, extraordinary artist with so much knowledge and so much experience, obviously now. I feel so privileged to be asked back or to be asked to do a film with him. I count my blessings. So the first one we did was Gladiator back in '99. And since then he's been very kind to ask me back. I hope they'll be astonished. I hope they'll be fascinated. I hope they'll be amused because it is quite funny. I think they'll be absolutely gobsmacked about the story because who knew? And the acting, LG, only her second film. Pretty good.
What really attracted me to this story was when I read the book, I absolutely sympathized with this very lost woman who I believe fell madly in love with Maurizio. It wasn't the name, it wasn't the money. She actually fell in love with him like he fell in love with her. And so when she starts, so through the story in the beginning, he allows her to make a lot of the decisions because she is absolutely more mature than him and has much more life than he has had. I believe that he was very innocent and she taught him the ropes and that's how she owned him. It was an incredible experience to work with such a cast all in one go. And I think it's always very important to have good actors telling your story, the story you want to bring to the public. So no doubt Ridley attracts incredible talent. And I think the script really it spoke to a lot of people. And the story is so fascinating, wildly entertaining. Oh my gosh, that was the most beautiful place. It was actually freezing though. You would never tell. The day after we shot there, it snowed, which is very unusual for Lake Como. But the house is this beautiful house owned by a Russian gentleman, and he rents this house out. I mean, I would live there. It was gorgeous. Setting it up was a lot of fun. You know, Rit's really good at setting up any action stuff. And so he kind of coordinated how he wanted to shoot that scene where they're all playing and beating each other up. So it was beautiful. She was pretty shocked because she had no idea that a family could be that violent with each other. All in game, she realized that nobody has each other's back. And that's why the father throws the son in the game knowing that he's a wimp and he gets beat up. Patrizia, you see her in that scene, she's just wide-eyed, looking at who are these people I'm getting into bed with. I'm just extremely blown away by Lady Gaga. She's an incredibly talented actress, more than we even thought. She really surprised us because she just threw herself into this part and became Patrizia. I think Gaga did the most amazing job because she really captured the essence of this character. She made her really innocent at the beginning. She made her full of love and expectations. Then when she's got to fight, she's fighting for her and her man. She's not doing it for herself, but he's not interpreting it that way. And of course the rest of the family hate her because they feel she's not a Gucci. What is she doing trying to be one? Well, Al Pacino, it was, for me, the biggest joy to see him with Ridley because they're contemporaries and they had never worked together. So the first meeting, they had never met. So the first meeting they had on Zoom, I was there and I saw it and it was really sweet and lovely, the two of them complimenting each other because they both admire each other so much and they're both at the top of their game. Jared, we all know, loves to get lost in his characters, and he's the master of that. And the way Jared came on to this project was we reached out to each other, we talked with him, and he really gravitated to the Pablo character, which we thought was because he's such a handsome man, and he turns himself into, you know, on a pudgy, out of shape gentleman. So we were just super curious at the beginning. What is he going to do with this character? Who's he going to become? But we never expected Paolo. When he walked on set with those prosthetics, I mean, it was shocking. He stood next to me. I did not know who he was. You know, Janti's been with Rid now since Gladiator, so she's part of the family. The team is our family. So Janti is just an artist. And she enjoys her work so much, and she really does her homework and deep research and has a team of people that make it all happen. So the clothes are always wonderful. Gaga transformed into Patrizia. I mean, Gaga from beginning to end, she only spoke to us with an Italian accent and she was always Patrizia. She was never Gaga. We found Roberto Bentiviglia, who is a wonderful writer, who's Italian, who has a sense of humor that is really sharp, and whose mother is in the fashion business. I mean, he was the perfect guy. He knew exactly what he was talking about. He knew the time. He played near where Maurizio used to play. So he really brought this story to life. And once we had that script, Rid said, I'm in. Rid is amazing. I mean, Rid really he makes his actors feel really comfortable. That's why in all of his movies, the acting is excellent. Ridley has a way, I don't know what it is, a magic, that when he talks to his actors, and whatever he says to them, he says it privately, so we're not a party to it. He knows exactly, he can say 2 words, and the actors, because they come and tell me that, they go, oh my God, all he did was say 2 words to me and he changed the whole thing. I totally understand now. Ridley's incredibly prepared. He storyboards everything. And so by the time he starts the movie, he's already played the movie out in his head because he storyboards the whole film, every scene. And so when he knows exactly what he wants when he gets to set. Adam just is his choices are excellent always. And he played this role. He really embodied what is a well brought up, rich Italian boy. He really nailed it because I know a lot of those. When I was growing up in Italy, I knew a lot of those Italian boys. He nailed it. It was impressive.
The project came about because of Janina Scott, who is Ridley's wife, but a producer in her own right, and she chased down the rights to this book well over 20 years ago, and was really kind of taken by, I guess, the familial struggle, the power struggle between, you know, what it's like for a family to have a dynasty, a fashion dynasty. And so Janina had an incredible amount of tenacity to stick with it and get this movie made. It's a real testament to a great producer when they stay with something forever. And she stayed with this movie for, you know, decades. And I think it's a huge credit to her that it got made and she saw it through. A lot of producers, they get a good piece of material, a book, and they sit on it and they can't get it, you know, completed, but Janina saw it to the finish line. So the movie got made because of her. Rid wanted to tell it almost in, not quite a docu-style, but in a realistic depiction of what this family was like, and then a little bit of heightened comedy and a little bit of letting the actors kind of take their own path. But more than anything, I think he wanted to showcase the bright and big characters of the Gucci family. The writer who we ended up kind of getting there with the script on, Roberto Montevegna, did a lot of research, but then ultimately threw it all away and kind of created his own narrative, sticking to the big, you know, pillars of what happened, but really creating his own dynamics of character and relationship within the people, within the story. So he did a lot of research, read a lot of books, looked at all the court records, but ultimately kind of, you know, defined his own narrative and wove through the story on his own. Essentially, we have Patrizia Gucci marry into the Gucci family. She marries Maurizio Gucci. She's, you know, from a lower class family, a family that's successful in their own right in the trucking business. And she kind of gets a taste of wealth and power and what it's like to live this very 5-star fancy life. And when she then has a separation with her husband and is kind of cast off from that life, she takes matters into her own hands. Lady Gaga plays Patrizia. You know, she is an extraordinary actress, and people probably haven't seen this side of her yet. She did an amazing amount of work and research on the character and fully committed in becoming Patrizia Gucci. She never really broke character. She was always, you know, speaking with the accent, speaking in Italian. And she gives an extraordinary performance as Patrizia. You see all these shades of her. She goes from doting and loving to infatuated to psychotic to murderous, you know, all in the course of the movie. The movie, to jump back to one of your first questions, is almost like an opera, the way the movie is telling itself, where you see, you know, you see comedy, you see tragedy, you see drama, you see despair, you see murder. So she plays all those shades through Patrizia, and she's the eyes with which we see the film. Adam Driver is a world-class actor and plays Maurizio. He gives a very restrained performance, which is phenomenal. We just worked with Adam on The Last Duel, and he plays an entirely different character called Legree in that movie. So for us to make 2 movies back-to-back with Adam and see him play those 2 different characters was really great for me as a producer to watch him play these 2 totally different roles. So Maurizio, he's very calculating in a way, but quiet and reserved, keeps his cards very much to his chest. And I think we see him grow from, you know, being almost kind of almost like a deer, like a lamb at the beginning of the movie, and becomes a wolf. And so you see this transformation of a guy who doesn't quite understand what power and money and wealth and status means at the beginning, and he's being led. He's infatuated with his wife, with Patrizia. And then over the course of the movie, you see him kind of grow into this more kind of manipulative, controlling, powerful, a bit not violent, but just a bit more of a controlling being, and someone who's going to make sure he's in charge of this business in his life. Maurizio, again, starts as kind of very intelligent law student, learning the law, learning the fashion business from an outside perspective of the law, and then understands what it means to have success. Partners with a big financial backer, starts to see Gucci grow in a way that it has not grown before, starts to realize that he could have it all for himself, and I think falls out of love, when his wife crosses him. And so we see him again start from this place of being a sheep and then turns into a wolf. Rodolfo is played by Jeremy Irons, and he is another just extraordinary world-class actor. We just have a plethora of these actors. I'm saying the same thing over and over, but the actors are all incredible. And Rodolfo plays Adam Driver, Maurizio's father, and he's very protective of him as his only, boy. He's widowed. He's a former actor who has been kind of a passive interest in the Gucci brand. And when Lady Gaga, Patrizia, starts to enter into his son's life, he kind of tells him not to follow through with it. He wants him not to pursue her and marry her because he thinks she's in it for the money. Everyone thought that Maurizio couldn't amount to much in this business. Ultimately, they're right. He does grow the business, but I think his spending and the way he carries himself and the way he kind of doesn't mind the shop or the down-taking of him, but he does breathe life into the business with the decision to hire Tom Ford and to build it. Aldo is played by another iconic legend who's Al Pacino. And we see this bright and colorful and a bit sinister character of Aldo Gucci, who is really a great salesman, but also has a bit of a nasty side to him if you cross him or if you try to lead the business in a way that he doesn't want it. And personally for me, it just was one of the most extraordinary things ever to watch Al, play this character and to work with him. I mean, I've been a fan of his forever, and to see him, go toe-to-toe with these actors was a cherished piece of my work history. It just was amazing. Aldo wants to commercialize the business at any chance he can. He wants to sell knickknacks and mugs and knockoff purses. He wants to open a mall in Japan. He is the most kind of business sense person of the family. The wonderful Jared Leto plays Paolo under a whole heap of incredible prosthetics and makeup, and I think he wins the award for the most patient with the preparation of getting ready for these wonderful days of work. So Jared is another actor who just went through such a deep commitment process to portray this role. He was never not in character when we were with him. I still haven't even met him outside of his makeup, which is something that we all wanted to give him space, let him do the separation. So he's a bit of the comic relief to the movie. He gives a remarkable performance as Paolo. I really think that he and Aldo could have their own TV show after the movie, and you'll see it as you see the film. You see Aldo embrace his son, both physically and with love, but that he refers to him as his idiot. He's not a very sharp or successful or substantial person. I think there's a big heart there. He wants to do well. So I think it's a totally different dynamic to Rodolfo and Maurizio. You see a great deal of disappointment in Aldo having to care for his son even as he gets into his older years and worry about him. He's a bit of a liability. So the dynamic's completely different, where Maurizio is this accomplished lawyer who has business intellect and skills, despite the fact that he goes on later to kind of spend a bunch of money frivolously on the company. Paolo's just lost. We went through a great process of finding the right prosthetic person for Jared, and a lot of exploration as to what worked and what didn't. almost to the last minute. And Jared was extraordinarily hands-on and making sure it looked authentic, looked real. I mean, with Ridley's tutelage, Ridley, helped form it and shape it with Jared, and wanted to make sure that when he was in the rugby scene, he was in some of these physical, altercations, when he was under big bright lights, both outside at Aldo's birthday and then also later on at his fashion show, that none of that stuff could read, false or read fake. And so Jared spent hours and hours, weeks with a great prosthetic artist who we work with to make sure that that look was perfected and didn't just look like a joke. It looked really like Paolo Gucci. The beautiful and extraordinary Salma Hayek plays Pina, and she's another character in the movie where you're not quite sure what's happening behind her eyes. She's a bit of a grifter, if you wanted to look deeply into it. Like anything, money can be a blessing and money can really be a curse. And so I think we see a family that runs out of good luck because they're all fighting over the last piece of bread. That's a big piece of bread, the business. So I think you see a family turn on itself, which isn't uncommon. The difference here is it's done in this hugely colorful, violent, murderous, comedic in certain parts, in a way. It is operatic, as I said. It's Shakespearean. It's a huge downfall of a major brand that was started, by their great-great-grandfather. So I think, the family could still preserve and still hold this business, but they don't. No member of the family is still at the company. And so I think you see what happens when family members are pitted against each other to try to squabble or fight over an asset. Transcends fashion. It's human relationships. It's, every core, feeling that I think people have that are wrong. It's like if you feel like you've lost power, or you feel like someone's getting richer than you when you deserve it. I think the brand it's less about the brand and less about this fashion than it is about this infighting and who wants what in the power struggle. It's almost unfathomable to me to think of a filmmaker who can make Alien, Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, Gladiator, The Martian, All the Money in the World, Gucci. To see that kind of trajectory for a filmmaker, there's not another filmmaker like it. And I know I work with Ridley very closely as his producer, but it is extraordinary to me to think of a filmmaker who can jump in and out of genres so effortlessly and have success in each and every one of them. I don't think there's another filmmaker like it in history. So I think for Ridley to see him jump into this movie was a joy, and whenever he moves toward a project, you see this whole swath of people follow, because it's Ridley Scott. There's no one better. He's a genius, and I don't use that term lightly. He really is a genius. He really hand draws every single frame of the movie, and there are archives and archives of this for years of his filmmaking. So you see when we get to the set, every frame of the film is hand drawn and colored by him. He does it for months before he preps. He films the movie in his head, as he says. And so when we get to that set, those drawings are handed out to every member of the crew, so everyone knows exactly what we're doing on the day. And that's a cheat sheet that no other filmmaker uses. No one has that to the extent and the creative extent that Ridley does it. The detail that he does it it's mind-blowing. So I think the filmmaking team, to answer the question, Darius Wolski, Genty Yates, Arthur Max, Mark Huffam, Yana Cabroni, there's not a better filmmaking team in my experience in the world, because it's reflexive. They know how to work with Ridley, and we do it so frequently. And the way we're able to do it so fast is because of Ridley's leadership and his preparation. There's no one else that does it like that as quickly as he does. No one else can walk onto a set and shoot 6 cameras in under an hour. Actors, filmmakers, writers, they all come to set and they're all flabbergasted. Darius is the best DP I've ever worked with. I think he complements Ridley so well because of his manner, his work ethic, but also his incredibly low-key and affable manner. And I think we had an embarrassment of riches with locations in this movie, where we were shooting in the Alps, in Milan, Lake Como, and Rome, and everywhere you pointed the camera, it looked really lush. But with Arthur Max designing, and then Janti's costumes, you know, Darius's photography took even a whole nother level of richness. And so I think he set a beautiful stage. I mean, I'll always think of Lake Como when I think of the cinematography of the movie. We had this incredible drone shot approaching the birthday party for Aldo, and then a beautiful shot right down this very long table with the backdrop of Como in the background. And just the way Derek filmed it, it was iconic. It just looked extraordinary. I mean, there are still shots that people, you know, were snapping off the monitors that just looked like pieces of art. The Gucci brand were terrific to us. They gave us, you know, carte blanche, opened everything for us, and that's very much in thanks to Janina Scott, her relationship with the Gucci brand and the owners, and she paved the way for both the brand to give us the ability to use the title and also the archives and all the fashion that's on hand. So Janti had a Herculean task ahead of her to both hit the authenticity of the period, to use all of the Gucci archives, to recreate the archives, to put Lady Gaga in something like, I don't know, 200 different outfits without repeating an earring or ever a piece of clothing. And I think you can see it on camera. You know, I think you can see that authenticity, especially from the period, you know, spanning decades. So that's a really hard task for a costume designer to, you know, hit this so effortlessly, to be able to deliver the Gucci movie with authenticity to character, to period, to what that actor did or didn't want. You know, making custom suits for Al and Jeremy and Jared and Adam. I mean, it just was a major task. Arthur, who we're working with again now, this is my fourth movie with Arthur, Napoleon, we're prepping. He's like an encyclopedia. He has this encyclopedic mind of history and periods, and he plus Ridley, hearing the two of them talk when they walk into a space, you know, we were at this cathedral this morning, and they both start talking about, you know, the genre, when it was built, what the influences were, who the leaders were at the period, and why that certain space is built that way. So when you have that level of history and knowledge that Arthur has, you can see it in the sets. You can see it in the pieces and the places and where you're going and what artwork's hearing which way. I mean, what it looks like in 70s or 80s New York and an Art Deco period in a stripped down white apartment that we actually shot in Rome, and how that has to look. What are those titular pieces that make you know where you are, you know? How do you make the Alps look rich and opulent when they know that the Gucci family has tons of money? So I think Arthur's knowledge of you know, all of these periods from years of studying and working really is reflected in the movie. Ridley will never, we wonder everyone's going to say what his age is, but he's older than I am, and he just won't stop in a great way. He has this curiosity and this insatiability. You know, we have Last Duel coming out October 15th. We have Gucci coming out November 24th. We're prepping to start shooting Napoleon in January. So we just got back from Malta, and we're scouting London right now. The creative genius that I mentioned about Ridley earlier, how he prepares for a movie, how he hand draws a movie, how great he is with actors, how he works so well to welcome people into the creative world he builds, that's matched by this business acumen and tenacity that's relentless. And that's why there's no one like him, and there never will be someone like him. Anybody who loves movies should go see this movie on the big screen. It's just not the same. The fashion shows, Gaga, the opulence, the way it's depicted from the Alps to Lake Como to Rome to Milan, there's not a reason for you there's no reason to not see this film on the big screen for the experience of Lady Gaga in her second biggest leading role. Hopefully they'll take away just a sense of enjoyment of great movie making and, you know, great artistry on all levels, from Ridley to Darius to Arthur to Janti to the performances from the actors. They'll see this great troupe of people that take their work really seriously but have fun and want to create, you know, a beautiful piece of entertainment. Story-wise, I think they'll take away that, you know, money isn't everything. Control and greed certainly are attributes that can really kind of work against you if you focus on them too much. Gucci has kind of transcended fashion now. You know, Gucci is a brand, it's just kind of in the blood of people in a way. You see Gucci and how important it is, you know, on the streets of Los Angeles and the streets of Milan or the streets of Rome or New York. You see it from high fashion models and elite to rappers to, you know, people in the music business. It transcends every, you know, demographic now. And that's why I think this movie can reach so many people, because it's a human story. So I think Gucci is not just a fashion brand. It's almost this iconic, this kind of image of opulence and wealth and success to many people, which led to the downfall of one of the people in the Gucci, you know, atmosphere, in the stratosphere, being, you know, Patrizia. So I think it is operatic again, I'll say, just to see this kind of tale to start with nothing and go up and hit that height and get too close to the sun and get too close to kind of that idea of wealth and power and everything that she wanted, and then have it just be deflated.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and comment on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to be notified when new videos are released.